Hello, my name is Prim, and welcome to the channel, where I like to focus on my creative process when creating fictional characters, fictional stories, and fictional worlds. I'm gonna start by telling you a few things about me, since this is my first video on the channel. I'm a lover of anime, video games, movies, and animation of all kinds. My favorite color is pink. My top 3 favorite anime are Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, Madoka Magica, and One Piece. My top 3 favorite movies are A Silent Voice, Finding Nemo, and Pooh's Grand Adventure. A thing you're gonna learn very quickly about me is I'm a yapper, especially when it comes to the things I'm very passionate about. I love creating new characters, and I love fleshing them out, so be prepared to hear a lot of info dumping about my OCs, which is actually what we're gonna do today. Or, at the very least, I'm gonna be introducing you to a new series I have. Welcome to OC Factory. For the few viewers watching who are unaware, OC stands for Original Character. They've been around for a long time, ever since the idea of creating a fictional story has been around. But they've only been recently brought into the public consciousness with the age of the internet. Technically, any fictional character classifies as an OC, just by the literal definition. But the term is mostly applied to original characters made by fans of a pre-existing medium, like movies, shows, video games, books, etc. They're most commonly made for animated TV shows and video games, especially since so many video games nowadays have customization mechanics. So any character you make in those games is essentially an OC. What we tend to think of as an OC has existed since Dungeons & Dragons became popular, as you are literally required to make one to play the game. The OCs I'm gonna talk about here are on my own, that I have made for many different mediums, but mostly anime and video games. These two mediums seem to be the biggest hub for artists to create their own original characters, as many of them have very exciting worlds, magic systems, character designs. They lend themselves to a lot of fun creativity. There tends to be a lot of stigma online towards people who create these OCs, as many of the, let's say, less creative ones have gotten their fair share of ridicule. As someone who's been creating OCs since I was 6, I've seen my fair share of cringy OCs, either being too edgy, a lazy recolor, or just a lazy self-insert. I'm not trying to put myself on a pedestal or anything. I've even been the person that's made these OCs, for crying out loud. I mean, every legit artist I know looks back at their old art and dies a little on the inside thinking about how good they thought they were at the time. But to any aspiring artists out there, if you keep at it, you're only gonna get better and better. The fact that you can look back at your old art and cringe just shows that you can recognize the things that you've improved on, or maybe even still need to improve on. I think creating OCs is a very useful tool in character design and character writing, creative writing, even creating a world around that character. I found myself using my characters to practice drawing in different art styles, and maybe even learning a tip or trick from that style that I end up taking into my own original style. I put in so much effort into my characters that I felt like it would be a waste to not do something with it. So I decided to make a show where I basically just yap about my OCs, which is literally what this whole show was created for. Hopefully some people out there will maybe take an interest in my characters, maybe get inspiration for themselves in making their own characters, because it's a lot of fun to share your OCs with other people, and maybe even get some fan art of your OC from a friend if they are also an artist. You don't even have to be an amazing artist to make an OC. Plenty of people make commissions, and plenty of other also use video games with those customization mechanics that I talked about to make their OC. Plenty of my friends, when playing D&D, would use the Baldur's Gate 3 character creator in making their OC to make that feel more part of the world, or maybe just to get some ideas. I'm definitely one of those people that takes a long time in creating my character if there's some sort of customization mechanic, and sometimes I'll spend more time looking around for different outfits than I am actually playing the game, especially the newer Pokemon games. For those out there who maybe aren't super artistic, but still would like to create their OCs, and maybe have quite a few video games that have customization mechanics, mechanics. I highly recommend Baldur's Gate 3, as I said, and a lot of the Soulsborne games for more of a fantasy vibe, but there are plenty of other video games with customization mechanics of various different genres. So I'd highly recommend going online and looking for some of them if maybe you want to try it out, or maybe just look at some different fashion magazines if you're really trying to come up with a good outfit. All this to say is I just want to talk about my OCs, but first I want to talk about my creative process when making an OC. Quick little disclaimer, these are my own personal rules. I don't think these are rules that every artist should follow to a T when designing their own characters. But if any artists out there with some good ideas but need some help with fleshing out their characters, having rules can help narrow down what you can or can't do with your character. I think Dungeons & Dragons is a really good starting point in creating an original character, since there's a plethora of information about each race, class, and a bunch of different worlds and genres to choose from. We can get more into D&D whenever I get to talking about my own D&D OCs. In short, create whatever character in any way you want that fits the vibe of the world you're creating them for. With that out of the way, let's get started. Rule 1. Try to follow the rules of the world you're creating a character for. This is the one rule that can change drastically depending on the fictional world you're playing around with. Every fictional world has their own logic, with some being more grounded and realistic, while others having basically no logic. The rules you'd follow when making a character for, say, The Walking Dead would be vastly different from making a character for One Piece. Both have their own rules that you really need to follow, but with drastically different tones and logic. When designing a character, I try my best to learn the rules of that world so my character can truly feel like they're a part of it and live within it. Rule 2. Try not to create a character that already exists in the story. When it comes to powers, I personally try not to give my character the same powers as an already existing character, unless if multiple of the same power is possible in the story. Say, characters can learn magic, and they show that multiple people can learn the same kind of magic. Like that, in that case, you can make an OC with the same powers as another character. But I do my best to try to make my characters unique in some way, if that story has multiple characters with drastically different abilities and fighting styles. Say for like a shonen anime, where that is very common. When it comes to personality traits, I think it's fine for an OC to have traits similar to a canon character, as long as they're not literally the same person, just with a different skin. I've seen this a lot in certain fandoms, but I don't think it needs to be too harshly criticized if it's purely just for fun, or maybe even just an exercise in coloring. But I think most people understand that if you want your character to be taken seriously and seen as unique, probably best not to take a screenshot of a character and just recolor them and give them some accessories. For those who know what fandom I'm inferring, you know. Rule 3. If you're going to make an OC have a romantic relationship with a canon character, try not to make that their entire character and their entire purpose for existing. Make sure they're interesting enough on their own. This is something a lot of OC creators get a lot of flack for, but I think it's really not that different from playing Dungeons & Dragons and trying to romanticize an NPC, or many other video games where that's an option. My own personal rules I usually try to follow is that I try not to make my OC romantically paired up with a character that already has a romantic love interest. Those rules can change depending on how the romance is written, and a lot of times when I create my OCs, they're for stories that haven't finished yet, so a lot of times I have no idea how a character's romance will end up. But I usually try to stay away from the characters that already have a romance plot, and try to pair my characters up with characters that don't have a romantic partner. Mostly, I do this with characters that I think would be interesting to see in romantic situations. You'll probably see a lot of people doing this with characters that they themselves have crushes on, and basically make their OC their own persona for that world, which I think is perfectly fine. I mean, that's literally what people do in visual novels and RPGs that have a romance option. But personally, when I create an original character, I think of them as a completely separate person with some traits that I'm familiar with. Romance can still be a tricky thing to write for me, so I also do this to practice writing different dynamics. And most of the time, it is just for fun, and I do get a lot of joy out of drawing characters in romantic situations. These OC ex-canonships aren't meant to be taken too seriously, but I still want to write their relationship in a way that feels believable. I never want my relationships to feel forced, since that completely goes against the whole point of practicing writing romance. Now that we've gotten all the rules and introductions out of the way, I'll give you a quick read on my video format that I plan to go ahead with in the foreseeable future. My format will be at least 4 chapters, with chapter 1 being my creative process, basically going into how I came up with the ideas for my characters, what role I thought they would fill in the story, and some ideas on their character designs. For chapter 2, we'll talk all about their powers, abilities, skills, all of that stuff. Basically their whole stats. And chapter 3 will be about personality and backstory, which will definitely be the longest. With chapter 4, we'll go into how I think they'd interact with the canon characters. But obviously that'll depend on if my OC is a character that is sort of inserted into the story with minimal changes, or will be basically a spin-off character with their own story going on that takes place in the same world. I created this video because I didn't want to have to go on through a whole 5-minute or 10-minute rant at the beginning of every single video where I start talking about my SCs and giving context on my rules, my thought process, and who I am. So I thought this would be maybe a good video to watch before watching some of my other videos where I do talk about my OCs, to give yourself a little bit of a warning on what you're going to be in for. But I'll try to put the link to this video in the descriptions of my other OC videos coming up, and don't worry, this isn't some sort of clickbait where I don't talk about any OC at all in this video. Well, definitely not in this video, but I'll have a separate video that'll be paired alongside this one. So, yep, and this part is completely unscripted, so that's just me. You can definitely tell the difference in how I ramble and how I write stuff down. Well, bye-bye, dreamers!